Welcome to our webinar, How to be Compliant in a Global Digital World. We have about 77 registered attendees from almost all countries, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm Alexandra and I'm the head of the ECO Complaints Office. It's a pleasure for me to kick off the road to our summit next week with in total 3 pre-sessions. The first one is right now. Before we start content-wise, I will have some housekeeping for you. I guess you all are aware of how these tools are working. However, once again, you're on mute. That doesn't mean we don't want to have your input or you aren't allowed to raise any questions. So if you have a question or if you want to contribute to the discussions later on, please use the chat functions and I will bring the information you provide to us to our panel. And last but not least, we will record this webinar and will give you the recording afterwards. So it's a real pleasure for me to hand over to Kira and Peter. Sorry, the same happened again and again. So welcome to the Complaints Office, where we often just mix Peter and Sebastian. So apologize for that. I will hand over to Peter and Kira, who just prepared this webinar, who will introduce you to the topics and the experts we have invited, and who will be your moderators today. Peter, Kira, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. First of all, I would like to introduce my colleague Peter, standing next to me. He's attorney at law and at the Complaints Office responsible for the ISP relations. Beyond complaint handling, and he's also responsible, he also represents us internationally at the InHope network.
Thank you, Kira. And yes, please allow me to return the favor. This is my colleague Kira Pig, also attorney at law at ECHO and responsible for youth media protection at the Complaints Office. And with that, I would like to give you a short opening to our topic today. As you all know, we at ECHO Complaints Office receive reports about illegal content on the internet. So last week, for example, we received a report from a Taiwanese NGO about potential CSAM hosts in Germany. Before that, we received a report from a German citizen about content in France. An Austrian NGO sends us reports about hate speech with relations to Germany. We receive reports from anonymous citizens speaking English for content in the Ukraine. What I'm trying to say is the internet is borderless. Everyone can access everything from anywhere. And this also contains, of course, illegal content, which seems to be on the rise, which we also show in our annual reports, basically year for year, that child sexual abuse material, hate speech, and other content is rising at each year. So, of course, naturally, voices become louder and louder to have this kind of content removed swifter and permanent, while in certain cases like child sexual abuse material, which fulfills, for example, the Interpol baseline, is illegal. Everywhere, illegality in general is kind of fluid. Each country has their own laws and systems, which leads us to the topic today. And the question, of course, of today, how can one be compliant in a global digital world, and especially as a company operating worldwide? So how could modern digital politics, self-regulation, prosecution, law enforcement, and media supervision look like, or be improved? We want to brainstorm and discuss this challenge or on this topic with the following expert, which brings me to the introduction of our panelists. And I would like to start with Dr. Alexander Kleist, who is the public policy lead for the German-speaking area DACH at Instagram, and he's a lawyer by profession with a PhD. In his role at Instagram, he is in contact with all relevant stakeholders like politicians, NGOs regarding topics like online security, youth and data protection, and media regulation. Kira, would you like to do the next panelist?
Yes, sure. We are pleased to have Dr. Laura Brahm with us today. She's head of supervision at the Media Authority of North Rhine-Westphalia. With her team, the lawyer also deals with cross-border law enforcement on the internet. So now I just get back to you again.
Yes, thank you. So the next one in our panel is Michael Hennecke, who has an academic background in law and has been working as a domain name market expert at SIDN, the registry of the NL domain. His area of expertise includes the promotion of security standards in the domain name industry, such as DNSSEC, DMARC, and DKIM. And Kira, whom else is here?
Yeah, we are also glad that Nina Morschhauser is also with us today. She's head of public policy, government, and philanthropy for Twitter in Berlin. She previously worked for a telecommunications company after spending almost 10 years working at the German parliament as policy advisor on media policy. And last but not least, Elisabeth Secker. She's the managing director of the entertainment software self-regulation body USK since 2018. In her position, she leads the teams responsible for organizing the process to assigning age ratings to video games and apps due to German youth protection standards. Thank you all for being here today. So, and as we all know who we are right now, let's start with the first keynote by Dr. Alexander Kleist from Instagram, which is about international youth media protection from corporate perspective. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind introduction, and also for bringing us all together to discuss those really important topics on how we can bring a global digital world together and to consider national regulations and what can we do to be compliant in a global digital world. And this is indeed also a daily challenge for a global company as Facebook and the service Instagram. So I want to give you an overview about our efforts on how we can be compliant in the field of youth protection. We see, you mentioned it before, but also specifically in the field of youth protection, we see a lot of different regulatory initiatives across the world. We have the AVMSD on European level. We have the e-privacy directive also touching on youth topics. We have initiatives in Germany, the Jugendschutzgesetz that just recently got updated, and also the German states are working on a new Jugendmedienschutzstaatsvertrag, which also touches on a lot of different aspects of youth media protection. Then we have the online harms bill, the age-appropriate design code in the UK. We have different laws in Ireland, but also globally, we see a lot of initiatives, be it in India, be it in Brussels, be it in the United States. And as a global company, we really need to be compliant with all of those regulatory initiatives and with all those regulations, which is a daily challenge. But also we believe it's not about being compliant with regulation. It's about building a safe place for young people, building a safe place where they can express themselves and where they are protected from potential dangers that might be out there in the global world. We can go to the next slide. So for this, I want to highlight what is our approach, how do Facebook and Instagram design youth experience? How do we design products for young people? And we believe for this in three principles. The first one is we want responsible empowerment for our users. We strongly believe in the importance of responsibly empowering young people to enjoy the many benefits of our platforms. Secondly, we need to build age-appropriate safeguards that recognizes the user's requirement for safeguards, for safety, specifically for young people, but also takes into account privacy risks, the well-being of users, and this is core of our approach. And we are continuing to develop new safeguards that are really appropriate for the different age groups. And lastly, this is core for how we can tackle the dangers that young people might be facing. This is innovation. So we continue to explore innovative technologies to provide a great experience for young people. We help them to keep them safe online, and we solve for the defining challenges for our industry. So what does this mean in detail? I want to show you a few examples, and we can go to the next slide for this. So first of all, responsible empowerment. Just recently, we started to default all new users of our platform below the age of 18 into private accounts on Instagram. So people who don't follow those users cannot access their content. And we made the experience from testing this. If we default private users when joining our platform, 8 out of 10 of the users will remain with a private profile, which is really great because it gives them even better protection. But on the other hand, we want to give users the choice. Young users might want to stay in touch also with, like, just thinking about young creators. They want to reach a broader audience, and which they can't if they are with a private profile. So we give people the choice, but we highlight the benefits of private accounts to existing teens. So we really empower them to make an informed decision and not just say them, you can be private or public. So we really give them the background. What does it mean to be private? Why is it probably better to be private? And what are the consequences if you switch to public? Next slide, please. So age-appropriate safeguards. How does this look like? What does it mean? Just recently, we are also not talking only about the dangers of content that might be harmful to users, but also like we also see it in the Jugendschutzgesetz in Germany. The laws are addressing communication dangers. So one danger is grooming. So we just started preventing teens from unwanted contact from adults. For this, adults cannot send private messages anymore to people under the age of 18 unless the teens follow the adult, and with that, show that there is a connection between. Only then the adult will be able to contact the teen via private messages. But also on the public surface, we just started this in the US and a few other markets, but we hope to roll it out globally very soon. We will protect teens from unwanted contact from certain adult accounts that have shown somehow potentially suspicious behavior on our platform. For example, if they have been reported a couple of times from other teens, that doesn't mean that they did something wrong, but there has been some behavior that was in some way potentially suspicious. They won't be able to find teens on our platform. They won't be able to see content from teens on our platform, and they therefore won't be able to contact them. And this is, I think, a very effective measure to address grooming on our platforms. But also advertisement. We are just about to change how advertisers can reach young people on our platform in terms of privacy. So in future, advertisers will only be able to address and target teens or young people under the age of 18 based on their age, based on their gender, and based on the location. They won't be able to target them based on their interests or on their behavior on the platform. And we also believe that this is also appropriate for young people to protect them from unwanted advertisement. Next slide, please. And as I said in the beginning, the most important thing we're working on is innovation. All the safeguards I mentioned before are based on how do we know, or do we know, is someone under or over 18 years old? Is someone a teen or is someone an adult? Of course, we ask all users for their age when they sign up, but this is only a very weak signal. Of course, you can just enter a signal that you enter a date that you're older, but also there we're working with signals to detect when people are younger. We collect not only the age at the registration, but we also educate parents. We give the community the option to report when they believe people are younger than 13 years, which means they wouldn't be allowed to use our platform. And also our content reviewers are trained to recognize when people are underage to use our platforms. But nowadays, we've developed technology that allows us to estimate the people's age, likewise, if someone is below or above 18, or also if someone is below or above 13, which would be the age, the minimum age to use our services. And for this, we use machine learning technology based on hundreds of signals that we are using. For example, like a very easy example, if your friends congratulate you to your 16th birthday and you entered that you are 21, this might be one out of many signals that we use, but there are also way more signals and people are able to report. And with machine learning, we are quite good in the meantime to estimate people's age and use this as a basis to protect them on our platforms. We are also in discussions with the wider technology industry on how we can work together to share information that helps different apps to establish the people's age. There are also considerations whether we can cooperate and work together with operating system providers. As a side note, we know the German states are also working on those efforts, but I think the way they are designing it right now, that just wouldn't work in the practice. However, we believe it's very important that we as an industry, that all the tech companies work together on and share information about people's age so we can really build a safe environment for them. And while better understanding age is part of a puzzle, we really need to reduce the incentive for kids to lie about their age. As I mentioned before, you're only allowed to use Instagram and also Facebook if you're at least 13-year-olds. But we also know there are people that lie about their age because they are younger and still want to use the service. That's just reality. And it's hard to prevent it. As I mentioned, we're working on technology to detect it, but also we strongly believe that we need to build age-appropriate experience also for those trends where they are in a very protected space with even higher youth protection and safety measures, but so that there's no incentive anymore to lie about their age, so they have their own safe space where they can use social media and share experiences. And that's also something we're working towards in future. But as I mentioned, most important is we need appropriate measures for all ages. But and that's my ask to all policymakers, to legislators, to regulators as well. All this relies on also a flexible regulation. We are glad that also in the German Youth Protection Act, there is a lot of room for flexibility, that there is the definition of a goal to protect young people online, and then that companies and regulators can work together on a way how this goal can be achieved best. Also, as services are very different from each other, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So we really need to work on appropriate measures for each service, and regulation needs to enable and empower us to continue our work and our innovation work in terms of protecting young people online. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I guess we will push questions to the panel later. And that means that I would give now the floor to Dr. Laura Brahm from the North Rhine-Westphalia Media Authority, who also has a keynote for us prepared.
Yes, I hope you can see my screen.
We can see the whole desktop at the moment. Now we see PowerPoint and now the presentation in full mode. Great.
Okay, perfect. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, today I have the pleasure to report from the perspective of a national media regulator. And I would like to explain the daily challenges of cross-border law enforcement. And to say it in advance, I have to say in the recent years, we have not paid enough attention to the protection of human dignity on the internet. We as media regulators have not paid sufficient attention to the protection of minors from unsuitable online content. And the reason for this is quite simple, because cross-border law enforcement is not a quick win. Minors can still easily find accessible pornographic content. Hate speech destroys democratic discourses, and even content glorifying war and violence are often just a few clicks away. This is, for us, why inactivity is not an option. Irrespective of the content, if it's legal or illegal, we note that content providers are increasingly making use of their freedom to provide services. And provide services across the European borders and across the borders between the continents. And they have every right to do so. That is very important to say. However, on the other hand, for a long time, the internet seemed to be an unregulated space where anyone could disseminate anything anonymously. This is no longer acceptable. We need to protect the values we have agreed on in Europe. And in the recent 1.5 years, we have found the courage, I think, to work with the existing legislation and tested the limits. Now, I would like to outline our existing challenges we have to face day by day. This is the identification of providers, the country of origin principle, and the liability regime of the different providers. For the first, the identification of providers. This is a challenge. It's a really big challenge because imprints are often not available. Sometimes false information is intentionally given. This means that we must try to investigate the actual content provider via contacting the host provider. However, even the host provider cannot often be determined directly, since only a so-called content delivery network can be identified. All in all, the provider identification does take a lot of time. Let me come to the country of origin principle. The country of origin principle is one of the keystones of the European regulatory framework for audiovisual media services. It guarantees that free distribution of media in the European Union by ensuring that the service is initially only subject to the regulation of its country of residence. In principle, the country of origin is responsible for checking the legal conformity of a service. In return, the other member state must ensure that the content is freely accessible. For good reason. The country of origin principle is a basis for a strong digital single market in Europe. It enables European media companies to develop the European market for themselves because it makes it easier for them to clarify their rights. In addition, the country of origin principle is a mechanism for safeguarding democracy. It guarantees that content cannot simply be banned in European member states. And this system can, for good reason, only be broken in rare cases. For example, the protection of minors, the incitement of hatred, or the violation of human dignity of individuals. Before any action can be taken by an addressed member state, cooperation procedures must be initiated. Let me come to the liability regime. The ECommerce Directive is 20 years old, and in the ECommerce Directive, this liability regime is fixed. The directive provides a graded responsibility depending on the category of service: content provider, host provider, or access provider. This means that initially only the content provider is liable. Services which only transmit or host the information cannot be held liable for illegal content as long as they have no actual knowledge of an infringement. In the first step, therefore, an attempt must be made to identify the content provider. And as I mentioned before, identification of providers is often a challenge and sometimes impossible. But we are facing the next problem. It is not clear when exactly the attempt to investigate has failed. In addition, in Article 15 of the ECommerce Directive explicitly states that service providers may not be subject to a general monitoring obligation for the information they transmit or store. From our point of view, two questions arise again and again. When has the media regulator done everything possible to identify the content provider, and will a host provider be liable if it allows anonymization or refuses to cooperate in identifying the content provider. To which categories, that's the second question, of services should modern platforms that simultaneously perform more than one of the functions, content and host, be assigned? So from our point of view, clear rules of procedures and responsibility must be developed. The Digital Services Act should address these issues. The identification of providers, as I mentioned, must be possible. It must be clear to what degree efforts have to be made. Accelerate cooperation procedures through fast and targeted communication and the central assignment of the right contact person is an issue that we have dealt with within the ERGA, the European Regulators Group for Audiovisual Media Services. We fixed it in an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. And lastly, it must be able to clear allocation to identify provider categories. Thank you for your attention.
And again, thank you. That was very insightful. And we push questions to the back for later. And our last keynote speaker for today will be Michiel Henneke, whom I will give the floor right now.
You. Are you seeing my PowerPoint right now?
Yes, we do in full screen mode.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Michiel Henneke, and I am working at SIDN. We are the registry for the .nl domain, the national domain of the Netherlands. And together with Germany, we are one of the biggest country domains in the world. Apart from Germany, the UK, and China, no country domain is actually bigger than the Netherlands. And the Netherlands are also in the top 5 of web hosting countries worldwide right now. We are an independent, private, not-for-profit foundation. The S in SIDN stands for Stichting, Stiftung in Deutsch. We've been doing the .nl zone since 1996, and we have about 1,100 registrars accredited, among whom about 50 from Germany and overall 200 from outside of the country. Now, when you are a domain name registry, and I don't know if everybody is completely familiar with what a domain name registry or registry operator is, but just to add this picture, you have the owner of a domain name is the, well, owner is the right term, but the registrant. For example, if you have a company, then your company is usually the registrant of that company's domain name. The registration goes through a registrar, which can either be accredited by ICANN for gTLDs or by the national registry operator for ccTLD. And the registry operator maintains the central record of domain name registrants and DNS settings, which we do for .nl in the Netherlands. And we do that for about 70% of all domain names in the country, which means that we have quite a good overview of who owns what domain name. Now, traditionally, we as a registry were not too involved in combating abuse. And the reason for that is what we call the classic view on abuse by some registries. And I'd like to point out that this is my personal interpretation of it, and that everything I'm saying here and henceforward is on a personal title. But domain names are actually just a label. They direct towards a server where content is hosted, but they do not themselves contain the content. We are just the label. So the classic view was that as a registry, you are not responsible for illegal content and therefore should not bother with combating it too much. Right? Well, not really. We beg to differ because we feel that in the end of the day, a domain, in our case .nl, but the same can be said for .de or .be, is a brand attached to a country. And when that brand is attached to a lot of illegal content, the brand deteriorates. So we have a fairly proactive policy towards combating abuse because we feel that a national domain should be trusted and safe for all users. So we actively combat abuse by research and data gathering. We have a big data platform called Entrada for that, which we've developed. We share data and inform stakeholders about potential abuse, e.g. all our registrars. We work with stakeholders in the country into setting up anti-abuse processes. This is kind of broad. For example, we collaborate with anti-DDoS agencies in detecting and combating DDoS attacks in the Netherlands. We have notice and takedown procedures where we are often the party of last resort. And we have mediation for cases which are not really that clear-cut, but which we feel can be resolved by bringing parties to the table. And in the last few years, we have been quite successful in combating abuse within our own zone. The uptime of phishing sites has gone down 84% in the last 5 years. The program that we and our registrars have developed for this is called Abuse to Zero for .nl. And we have taken down 5,000 fake web shops since 2018. And especially the latter one is a case in point as to where, as a domain name party, you can really combat abuse in your zone. Because for this, we used machine learning. And it was also already mentioned by Dr. Kleist. Machine learning is a way to really take down large amounts of abusive domains very fast. For the fake web shop detection, we paired with credit card companies by basically exchanging data about what we and they believe is a fake web shop. We can then scan all the domains in the .nl zone, which, as I said, is 70% of all domains in the Netherlands. We also started doing it for .com and other domains active in the Netherlands. And by constantly checking, okay, is this suspicious domain actually an illegal or fake web shop? We've been able to really refine the detection mechanism through machine learning and have been able to take down fake web shops in .nl very, very fast. Well, why are we doing this? I already said we are independent, we're private. Are we altruists motivated by the good of the internet? A lot of us actually really are. But as was mentioned in my introduction, I'm also into the marketing of the .nl domain. And for me, it's not just altruism, it is about the image of .nl and the Netherlands as a brand. What you see here, this is a graph which shows the brand values of .nl, the Dutch national domain, and .com, which is our major competitor, so to speak. And we distinguish ourselves from .com primarily because .nl is considered trusted, reliable, and safe. This is what makes Dutch entrepreneurs choose .nl over .com, and this is why we feel combating illegal content in our zone is so important, even though strictly speaking, it would not always be our responsibility to do so. But in spite of the success of some things we've done, we're always left with an ambiguous feeling, and this is, I think, the link to the topic of today's panel. Unfortunately, security in the domain name industry is like working with communicating vaults with different levels of water in it. If you push down the level in one vault, in this example in .nl, it tends to pop up somewhere else. So, for example, since several years, since we started cracking down on illegal content in .nl, there has been an immense spike in the .ml domain, which belongs to Mali in Africa, being used for abusive and illegal content. And I'm taking this example, it's not the only TLD used in this way, but to show the creativity, unfortunately, used by cyber criminals in evading measures such as ours. You know, they're just looking for a TLD that looks like ours and then hope that whoever is targeted by, for example, a phishing mail or a fake web shop does not notice the difference between the M and the N in their browser. And this, I think, is why international collaboration needs to be developed in earnest if we really want to make the internet a safer place content-wise. That was my short contribution. If at some point you have any questions about the way we organize abuse detection and combating in the Netherlands, my colleague, Mr. Giel van Spaandonk, is our absolute abuse expert. He is currently on holiday, so couldn't make it to this particular panel, but you can reach him through the email address mentioned here if you have any questions about how we cope with abuse.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And thanks again to all of you for the very interesting insights from these different perspectives. And following that, we would now like to open our panel discussion with a question addressed to every one of you. As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the EcoComplaints Office these days, we would like to know what has changed in the last 25 years from your point of view. Have challenges changed and what impact does this have on compliance? Elisabeth, maybe you just want to start, also looking at the challenges in terms of cross-country age labeling, and then we just go around.
Thank you, Kira. I'm happy to join today's conversation. Yeah, I think looking at the past 25 years, a lot has changed. The previous speakers already pointed out that there was a great shift also in the market of digital products. So as well, companies as well as regulators have to deal with these new challenges. From our perspective, or from the perspective of age rating, the biggest challenge we are facing is how to create age ratings also in the digital world on only digital distributed products. So what we have done as USK is already starting an initiative in 2013 to create age ratings also on digital platforms like the Google Play Store, Nintendo eShop, and other game platforms. And yeah, that's actually also a point I'm sure we will discuss today. How also international collaboration can help to create compliance also on a national level, because on the example of IAC, yeah, we founded an initiative with other rating institutions worldwide, and have seen that there is a need for age ratings also for digital products. So we started this initiative, and having kind of also the national focus still not leaving the national focus. So what IAC is doing is kind of creating an environment for developers to rate their product, but getting a national age rating. And that changed a lot in terms of compliance for us, for the USK, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Somebody wants to add something to that? Okay, that's fine too. Then I would actually go to the next question. If nobody wants to jump in, and you can interrupt me at any time, of course. And
I thought we're going around.
Yeah. I just wanted to keep it in order so not everybody
with
speaks
this question. Oh, sorry.
Now you can start, Nina. No, please go. I'm sorry.
Of course, I think we see two challenges or changes. The one is, I'd say, changes in behavior of our users. So I guess all companies, all services, social media services have applied more and more rules, more granular rules, and applied local laws. And due to this kind of application, we see a shift of users getting better in understanding how we enforce our laws and rules and policies, and also the laws. And we see a pattern of avoiding these by, for example, where you would have seen maybe a few years ago a clear violation by posting a tweet or content that is clearly illegal. Now they better understand how to avoid these gaps, and then just not being illegal, or they even try to use pictures, for example. We see this when it comes to doxing. People don't post like a postal address like Kupferstraße, they post pictures just to avoid being catched. And we see this also by trying to avoid German law. They start leaving out parts of words. They don't use vocals anymore. Also to, I guess, avoid being catched by AI. The second thing we see is, like, we're seeing more and more regulation coming, country-specific regulation. While there used to be the ECommerce Directive, we've seen the NetzDG, and we've seen copy-paste, or not copy-paste, but copied by several states. The Justitia, which is an NGO and how do you say, an institute in the Netherlands, has seen, I think, 13 similar laws in countries last year, and there's more to come this year, from Russia to Turkey, but also Austria, and they all focus on illegal content that is illegal in the specific country. So this is a challenge, and that's, of course, a challenge for us to being compliant with local regulation, because the more specific the local regulation is, and looking at certain content being illegal only in one country, we have to deal with it. So our solution at the moment is, if we see something reported for being, for example, under NetzDG, we look into it under German law, and then we country withhold it only in the jurisdiction, so in Germany, to be compliant in the one country, but also not to be compliant for laws in other countries where it might be seen as overblocking. And seeing more and more countries applying similar laws, it's of course more and more challenging to apply the specific terms, especially since lots of this content, hate speech, is very much in the gray zone. We know that courts, for example, in Germany, usually take about 700 days to decide on specific content, if it's illegal or not illegal. We only have between 24 hours and 7 days, and that's of course no doubt a challenge.
Thank you.
I can just add from the perspective of a regulator, if you don't mind, because from our perspective, the challenge is on a real other topic, because we have to deal with the fact that we have to identify who is the content provider. That is not that easy for us, as you might have heard before from my little keynote. And we have to deal with challenges day by day, like a simple formal notification of hearings or notices, to send them abroad is not that easy for us, because the law it does not stick to the truth anymore, because we have to send hearings and notices to the Netherlands or Italy or wherever you can think of in Europe or without Europe, and that takes weeks and sometimes months to contact the real provider and send him a hearing. So this has changed within the last 20 years, because like just look, 10 years ago we had to deal with providers based in Germany targeting the German market, and now we have to deal with providers based all over the world targeting the German market. And that's the big challenge for us.
Yeah, I can also add, I can agree to all that is said, but specifically what Nina mentioned, 25 years, it's such a long time in the digital world. Like Instagram just recently had its 10 years birthday, so it's that's super long in for digital. But yeah, we've had the ECommerce Directive in Europe for quite a long while, and it's still in place. It's at really a framework. Not everything was perfect, but a framework that could like really develop a great ecosystem in the digital sphere in Europe. And there are a lot of important rules in there. So many of them are still like totally right from our perspective. So that you can rely on the country of origin principle, that you have a legal basis for your operation, not only in one country, but also in a broader European market. But also what Nina mentioned, we've seen a lot of new laws coming up and not respecting the country of origin principle, or like basing on a market-based principle. And those are really huge challenges for us as a global company, be it that we need to geo-block certain content when it's only illegal in one country, what we of course are doing and will also do in future. But I think it's really important to have a coherent framework over many countries, and not only in Europe, even globally. And the challenges there are even bigger. Just thinking about also our own policies, the process of developing these policies, that they fit to not only one market. The content is global, so the policies need also to be global. And there's so many different, like the way people think about content and certain types of content. But also thinking about NetzDG procedures, like we have to act in a very short time, and if we fail to do so, there are potentially very high fines, while at the same time a court that is main purpose is to value the content, whether it's legal or not, or illegal. They take like hundreds of days of time to do this assessment, and we have to do it in 24 or 48 hours. So that's also something we need to have in mind, that the world is so much faster. Of course, there are dangers if illegal content remains online for too long, but also technology is playing a big role and helps us a lot to identify illegal content and to take appropriate action to that content. But also technology is not perfect. Technology is improving, and we are also as a company constantly improving our processes, but it's still a way to go. And we know that we need to improve, but also we need to have a framework, coherent framework, at least in Europe, but better even globally. And those challenges will remain even bigger in the future.
Just adding to the speakers before me, looking at the problems that we face, and I especially recognize what Dr. Laura Bram says about the international dimension here. We see that the internationalization of digital commerce and e-commerce should be followed by internationalization of electronic identification. And right now, that is not the case. If we want to identify somebody from Germany, the swiftest way is often to ask this person from Germany to step in the car, drive to the Netherlands, and show his passport. That is the way it is. And with eIDAS, the European Union has already taken one step towards a better eID on a European level, but a good, reliable eID for all persons living in the European Union would really make combating illegal content in the entire Union a whole lot easier for parties such as us.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to add to something, or?
I just had a quick thought about what Nina Morschhäuser and Alexander Kleist said before, that the social networks have just a few hours, 24 hours, or a couple of more hours to hand over hate speech content, according to the NetzDG. That is why we are working together with the Department of Public Prosecution in a project that we call Verfolgen statt nur löschen in Deutsch. I think you can translate it with prosecute, not only delete. That is why we work with the department first, together with the department first. And if the department says, okay, I think this is a real hate speech content that is illegal according to the German law, and then they start to investigate who is the content provider. And then they hand it over to us again, or give it back to us again, and we go to the social networks and force them to delete the content, and not before. Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I think it's a really good project to do it this way around.
Yes,
I would also like to add something what Alexander said, and also Nina, because I think that's a very important point too. The fact that we have this fragmented regulation, even in Germany, not only in other regions of the world, but still in Germany. I mean, picking out the example of youth protection, we have two laws. We have now a new Youth Protection Act, which has actually a good kind of I mean, the intention was good, but the on the operational level, I would say there is still something we have to face in order to include now this changes in all our institutions and also for companies. So I think the big challenge is also the lot of stakeholders also on this point, on authority level on the one side, but also on the fragmentation of regulation. So I think there's a big need for more harmonization on this point.
Thank you. I think that's a good point to move to the next question, because the next question we had in mind was regarding community guidelines, terms of services, and acceptable use policies. In my view, basically all the same with different names. But since we now see that the laws are either too fragmented or too much, many well, basically every company has a terms of service where they try to consolidate this in some way, and yet they are under fire from basically all sides. Perhaps because they have some legal content in there too, or go further than the laws. So the question would be more like, can something done to create more acceptance on those house rules, or are those house rules good? Basically house rules, is the question.
I think, oh, sorry, Alex, go first. I was first, next, last.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so first of all, we're really glad that the German Federal Court of Justice just a few days ago confirmed that it's in accordance with the German law to have those house rules, which I think was really a very important decision. We are still waiting for the ground, so I can't share any details about that yet, but the court confirmed that we are allowed to have house rules even when they are stricter than the law. And I think from our perspective as a platform, it's important for us to have the possibility to implement those house rules. Just a few examples, like what we've seen in the UK after the Euro final. We saw a lot of racism on social media against those footballers, those young guys who missed their penalty, and it was really ridiculous what they were facing. But a lot of this, like racist content, is not illegal. Even under German law, it wouldn't be illegal. But still, I think we all agree that this is not kind of content that should be on social media. We don't want to have racist content on our platforms. But the bar to be illegal, it's quite high. Also thinking about Volksverhetzung, a lot of content is not illegal, but it just shouldn't be on social media. We don't want to be we want to give the audience to that kind of content. So it's really important to have those house rules. And as I focused my keynote on youth protection, the big issue in the field of youth protection, or like with mental health and well-being on our platforms, but it's specifically for young people, is bullying and harassment, like within classmates that bully each other. And this is also taking place, of course, on social media. It's taking place in the classroom, but also on social media. All this is not illegal, but still we don't want to be the platform for bullying others, where you can bully your classmates without any consequences. We want to be a nice platform where everyone where people can express themselves without fearing to be bullied for that. Also, again, that's not illegal to do that, but we don't want to be the platform to allow such kind of content, and therefore it's really important to have those house rules, and also that those house rules may be even stricter than the law. And last but not least, in a global digital world, laws are so different in different countries, and there is no one-size-fits-all policy. So it's really hard to develop our policies to be a global platform, and then it's hard to just have the same bar as the different local laws. Of course, if something is illegal in a country, you will take it down. That's not the issue. But we also need the freedom to have house rules that are stricter than the law.
Yeah, I completely agree, and would just like to highlight what Alex said. 2 points, maybe. The first thing, why there's so much discussion around our rules and policies. Oh, Mrs. Brown's left it. I think the first one is, I mean, the challenge with global policies and rules is, of course, that they apply to everyone in every region, in every world. And sometimes content is, as it's great content, different perceived in one country to another. For example, a slur might be perceived funny in the UK, and even if it's the same, if it's not a language issue, it might be perceived as very aggressive in the US. So that's why we kind of changed our approach during the last few years and tried to be more transparent and also to be more inclusive in how we develop our policies. And when we develop new policies and we have enough time, we set up a process of consultation. For example, during the summer, we opened up a consultation about our world leaders policy, which applied to world leaders on the platform, and opened up a consultation and have done expert interviews. And we've seen 45,000 submissions for the policy development, which shows that there is a need globally to have an impact on the structure and the form of the policy. And I mean, the submissions came from across the world, not only the US or Europe, they're from Africa, everywhere. The second thing is maybe that the prism, like the focus was on simply taking up or moving down content during the last few years, and people sometimes felt, that's our recognition, yeah, maybe it was, they felt that unfair with when we just took down content, even if it was not illegal. So we think the approach could maybe shift a little more, and we should not only focus on leave up and take down, but providing more context to the users or make things less visible, rank them down, and at the same time give the user transparency why the user doesn't see stuff or why it's ranked down, give transparency to the ranking and the algorithm, and just have a bit more coherent and broader approach than just see stuff or not see stuff because it's being actioned.
Because I just jump in. From my point of view, it's so easy how it is. Because I just, from my perspective as a regulator, I stick to the German law. I don't deal with the other how you call it. Is always different names. The community guidelines or however you name them. I just stick to the German law, and if a content is illegal in Germany and a provider focuses on the German market, the content is illegal for me and I have to deal with this. So it's a quite short answer and easy answer for me from the perspective of a regulator.
Yeah, just one point to mention, what I was saying about ranking or like putting a content behind layers, I think this applies much more for what we call harmful content, but maybe not illegal content. I think that's the difference we're going into, that there is a different approach for clearly illegal content and then harmful content.
Yeah, you're right.
I think just adding to what Alexander said, regulations by platform itself are much more refined than application of the law. If, for example, someone were to ask us to take action against Instagram.nl or Facebook.nl, from our perspective, the only option would be to take down the entire site based on perhaps one post. That would be completely disproportional. So we always point to the terms and conditions of the platform itself to make sure that we can point users to more proportional measures, because the moment we have to do something with a domain name or site that big, it is, well, there's a Dutch saying for that. It is to kill a mosquito with a cannon. Well, it just is not. Well, proportionality tends to get lost, and that is why being on the safe side with your own guidelines is so important for platforms.
And to have one addition, I think it's also important for smaller companies, because we are not only dealing with the big platforms who have the resources and are able to have good house rules. As a self-regulation institution, we have also like kind of smaller companies. They have to be compliant. They want to be compliant, and also they want to create a safe environment for their users. For example, in the gaming section. So. From our point of view and from our experience, also providing examples for good community standards or community guidelines is also, I think, yeah, an important key to create a safer environment online.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. It was quite informative and a very good point of view to differentiate between the illegal content and the harmful content, because of course legality and harmful content or terms of service might direct different ones of them. Which kind of brings me to the next question already, and kind of also want to hang on this question. So we wanted to ask what then the solution might be for a better way to do that, or what would make your jobs easier. And when I listen to your answers now, I would say, well, harmonization is probably not realistic, or not a, well, perhaps you can jump onto that too, but is the house rule solution basically already the best we can get, in having in mind that all national laws are implemented in those? Is that even possible? Is the question clear? If so, anybody who wants, or I can start asking people directly. Alexander moved his hand, so do you want to answer this?
I can try. I mean, I think it's still good that we have like house rules on the one hand, and also laws and on the other hand. And I agree, full harmonization of criminal law, that won't be possible, even not within Europe, but also not globally. What would help us as a platform even more is that we have clear procedures, and that those procedures are harmonized, like the processes. What I mentioned before about NetzDG, the very strict deadlines, the very high potential fines, and all this. So we're really welcoming on European level that the EU Commission and the European states are working on the Digital Services Act, because we believe this will lead to more harmonization, at least within Europe. And it's very important from our perspective that we have clear processes that enable us also to apply the local laws. And yeah, as you said, it won't probably happen that all local laws are, of course, not harmonized, also because like the world is just different, and you just see it these days in so many countries. And yeah, but we need clear processes, clear guidance, and how to deal with illegal content. And I think that's clear in many countries already, but that like the processes are harmonized. And also we need legal certainty on how we can apply on the procedural side, how we can apply our own house rules. That's also important for us. And that we don't have a fragmented legal framework within Europe and globally.
Yeah, and did I understand it, Dr. Brahm, that a clear process, although you only look at the German law, clear processes would also help you with, let's say, players or stakeholders from outside of Germany? Would that also something that would help you?
Yes, if we have a clear focus, or if we can investigate who is responsible for the service, that would help us a lot. But we often have the problem that, for example, we have illegal content on a social network, the content provider cannot be investigated, and then we have to go over to the host provider, which is the social network, and then we have to try to force the social network to give us the contact details to get in touch with the content provider. And if we have clear persons, and if we have clear named persons who we can talk to at the social networks, it will be a lot easier to to get in contact with the content provider, and then force the law. Instead, we would have to hand over to the host provider and force him to delete the content. But according to our goal, which is prosecute, not only delete, it would be easier for us if we can get in touch with the content provider first.
Okay.
Just
please
adding,
go ahead.
Just adding to what Alexander said about harmonization of procedures. On our level, this would solve another problem, namely that whenever, for example, we in the domain name industry crack down on illegal content, we make the procedures for registering a domain name more complicated, and you see that users tend to shift to the less regulated alternatives, like, for example, .com. if procedures around abuse in domains and hosting are more regulated across the European Union, regardless of the content and the material criminal law, but purely from the procedural point of view, it means that all domains and hosters would have to comply with those procedures, and they will no longer be, how shall I put it, they will no longer provide a competitive edge that can be used to influence the market relations between parties. Every party would have to comply with the same procedures then. And I think that would be really beneficial at our level.
Okay, Nina, Elisabeth, do you want to add something? Otherwise,
I think we would always prefer, of course, more harmonization, especially around processes and standards, as Alex mentioned. I think we would also favor if there's incentives for a more holistic approach. Things I mentioned, or measures like supporting algorithm transparency, limits to discoverability instead of just leave up or take down, correspondence transparency and standards, and also maybe providing more user choice incentives just to offer these kind of services, to make sure we have also incentives for smaller companies and the ability for smaller companies to provide their services, because I guess they can't fulfill, like Cecilia mentioned, all the rules that apply in different jurisdictions. The other long-term goal is maybe we're working on an open standard. That's an idea we developed a few years ago. An open standard, so we can provide the data of Twitter, but other services can apply their service to the data. So they could, for example, apply an approach that is especially to protect minors, still using the Twitter data, but fulfilling the local laws or the local legislation. I don't know if that's understandable. The project is called Blue Sky, and the idea is that just to make sure there's different services available but apply to certain legislation, we would provide an open standard. And if, let's say, a service would say, okay, I want to focus on minors, then the service could apply our data and but apply their own standard and fulfill, for example, local laws that are very high or different to other.
Being said that we are, or our main focus is below the removal of illegal content, I just want to add that I totally agree with all already said. Like, we really need clear procedures, but we also need a legal framework that has the potential to be internationally connected. So we need this kind of regulation where we also kind of be compliant in different countries. For example, I mentioned the IX system before, and that's an approach to go only once through one procedure, but having like the legal compliance in all the different regions. And I think that's maybe an example for collaborations also between rating authorities, but also between media authorities, like Lara Bram already mentioned, the ERGA group. I think these kind of initiatives really help for better compliance here.
Okay, thank you. Nina, you mentioned open standard, and would you also say that a standardization could help to be compliant between companies or all stakeholders, basically? So just from the top of my head, let's say, I don't know, Ms. Bram has something she wants to remove, and then she has a standard procedure, a standard format she could send to Alexander or to Michael. Would that something that could work in one thing, or is that something where you think, well, that's a little bit too much, Peter?
I mean, I think everything that's standardized does help all of us, because yeah, as soon as you have individual setups, it's making things complicated. That's what we see with, for example, the German law, and then now other laws. We might have to implement report flows for each country, which is complicated for us, and that's the same for the regulation offices, if they have different procedures for every company or even for every country where they investigate. And I mean, we see this. I mean, I guess we have some examples where collaboration between regulators, civil society, or governments and companies is being quite fruitful. For example, I mean, that's around areas where it's clear that the content is illegal in all the countries that are part of this collaboration. For example, the Gift City, or the Christchurch Call, or even the Tech Coalition. And I guess it's easier because, for example, the Tech Coalition is around content that shows CSE, so site exploitation material. And that's pretty clear that it's illegal in all the countries where we're operating. But I think we can learn from these collaborations, and we've seen this especially during the Christchurch Call, where it was founded by Jacinda Ardern and Emmanuel Macron after the Christchurch terrorist attack, and she managed to bring all stakeholders to the table and define A, what's the goal, and B, what's the red line, and then start discussing. And they could really make an effort to make things better. And I think that's something we can learn from for other fields, because we see regulation coming up for minors in different countries, and it's easier for us, and I guess it's more successful if it's coherent or harmonized during as many states as possible.
Yeah, just as Nina mentioned, I think the examples on terrorist content on the one hand, and also child abuse, child sexual exploitation content, those show that also the companies are willing to cooperate not only with each other, but also with regulators and institutions to really tackle those big issues for society, and to make sure that this kind of content is, if it pops up, that it's deleted on all our platforms and from all companies. And I think those are really, really important coalitions and cooperations between the companies. But also, of course, as Nina mentioned, this only works to a specific extent where this kind of content, where it's global alignment that this kind of content is illegal. And that's also not the case for all content.
Yeah, so we are running basically into the same issues we would have with the full legal harmonization. We would have the same with standardization of reports, because you can't match that to everything. Okay, I was told we only have 15, well, now only 12 minutes left. Is there something anybody wants to add to the conversation? Otherwise, I would go to the last question. That is basically the question about the outlook and your wishes for the future, and yeah, what you think would be helpful in your specific sphere. So first question, anybody wants to add something to before? No, great. So then the last question for this webinar would be an outlook. Do you have any desires for the future? Do you think there's something that could help you in your specific field of expertise? And I think I would start with Michael. Do you, I mean, I had to smirk a little bit, because I saw the development of registrars and registries from the beginning, in the sense that now we don't have anything to do with it, and now there are certain registries saying, no, send us the report about child sexual abuse material, we will take it down. What would your outlook or your wish be for the future?
I think that the registry community as a whole will be more proactive in the future. This is a trend that I'm seeing with my colleagues already, and that I think will only develop. Very few countries, registrars or hosters actually want to pop up in a list of abusive hosters or parties. They really don't. I rarely encounter them. I already mentioned at the beginning that what would really facilitate our work and of parties like us on the infrastructure level is a good functioning European eID, like, for example, the Estonians have. So, you know, visit Estonia would be one of my primary advices for years to come, because that is the only country in the European Union which, in my opinion, has so far relatively really nailed it down.
Okay, thank you. Elisabeth, do you want to go next?
Thank you. Yeah, my wish for the future is also that regulators are still believing and seeing the system or concept of self-regulation as being one of the main concepts, because it's faster. We can directly communicate with the media authorities. We have a very good connection also with the German media authorities to prevent abuses and so on. So I think this concept really has proven its worth. So it's important that regulators also see that in the future. I also am hoping for harmonization in the legal framework, especially when we have on a national level different legal frameworks side by side, which are addressing the same issues, like NetzDG, youth protection law. So we have a lot of different regulation, and I think there is a need for more clearance which kind of measures providers and also companies should take. Yeah, that are the main points.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thank you. From my point of view, my wish for the future is that we get better investigation tools so that we can investigate who is the real content provider, who is responsible for the content, and that we get an answer by law. When do we have done everything possible to identify the content provider? And when have we done enough to identify the content provider? Because often it is for us impossible to identify the responsible one, and then we have to hand it over, the content over to the host and access provider. And so this is an answer I would like to get by law, so that it is a lot easier. It should be a lot easier for us to hand the content over to access provider and get the content down from the internet. Yeah, and yeah, I think the second point is, which I would be happy if it would be answered in the future, is to which categories does a social network belong? Because we think in the categories of content host and access provider, and that is not what we should deal with 20 years after the ECommerce Directive, because a social network is a host provider, and I think in these categories, but it can also be a video sharing platform or anything else, and I think the law is not clear to which of these categories yeah, a service belongs, and I think this should be more clear in the near future.
Yeah, thank you. Good points. Alexander, do you want to continue?
Yes, as we touched on a couple of times, but also the other colleagues already mentioned, I think it's important to have a harmonized legal framework that also the law gives us the answer to many of the questions that are still open. So also we as a company have a clear legal framework within which we can cooperate. We also strongly believe in the role of self-regulation and self-regulatory authorities. This is, I think, also a way forward to timely identify and action illegal content on our platforms. And I also wish, but also strongly believe that technology will help us in future even more to tackle issues, to identify illegal content, to identify harmful content, to help us with the big question, which I mentioned in my keynote, around how can we determine the age of users. And I just wish that the cooperation between regulators, between self-regulatory authorities, and within the industry, that we can continue to build this cooperation and all together build a safe and secure place for all users and also for children in the internet.
Thank you. Nina, do you want to finish the round?
Yeah, I think the DSA is at the moment the place where the norms are being discussed, and we really hope that the norms we talked about today, but also the benchmarks like transparency, user choice, but also that the norm of not applying a one-size-fits-all approach is being seen from the regulators around the DSA, and to make sure we can continue with an open internet and innovation, and also protect or support smaller companies and competition.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm afraid I have to conclude our first pre-session, since we are, well, almost out of time. Or do we have any further questions? Great. Sorry, I got the answer before I question. So yes, if any of you would like to improve their German, they can. We are happy to see you at our pre-session on Thursday, which will be on prevention and law enforcement. And if you want to improve your German even further, you could join us on Monday at 10 at our pre-session number 3, where we will talk about AI and technology and how it can help. And it's great that some of you already basically touched upon that this will perhaps lead to a better work in that field. So with that, I can only say thank you, all of you, for being here, for helping us with this topic and sharing your expertise. And yeah, until next time, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.